So what are fractional appointments? Well, first, I just want to talk for a minute about where this comes from, what's behind the concept of fractional appointments. And it basically comes down to equal pay for equal work. This core concept. I mean, this is something that just about everyone agrees with, that people that are equally qualified, that do the exact same work, just, in basic fairness, basic justice, should be getting the same pay. It's just, unconscionable that would not be the case. So our primary demand this time is equal pay for equal work. And how we're going to do this, our proposal is that we want to convert PTLs to fractional NTTs. We would no longer be called PTLs, we would be called fractional NTTs. This would recognize our true role at Rutgers. So we, in our proposals to the university, we have used the term fractional NTT to refer to ourselves. For those of you who have come to our bargaining sessions, you've seen our proposals. This, for example, is one of our proposals relating to the Professional Development Fund. And you can see that we have used the term fractional NTT in all cases in this. So the university came back with a counter to this proposal. And here's their counter. Well, what did they do? They went through and took every place where we had fractional NTT and they replaced it back with PTL again. Well, why did they do this? Well, here's their answer. OULR, that's management, that's the Office of University Labor Relations. They just say the university rejects replacing PTL with fractional NTT, and we're going back to PTL. Why? So this is their response so far. And I encourage you all, if you haven't been to our bargaining sessions, to come to the next one on August 29th. And you can, as an observer, and you can see what we're proposing and what the university counters. It's very eye-opening, I think. So we're demanding equal pay for equal work because it's just unjust for Rutgers to pay PTLs approximately half of what they're paying full-time non-tenure track faculty to teach the exact same courses. And we're going to do that through fractional appointments. So what do we mean? Well, the starting point is that we understand that full-time non-tenure track faculty teach the same courses. So we are proposing that we use their annual minimum salary to calculate the basis for our minimum salary. So we no longer would be having a totally separate contract where we just come up with, salaries, out of thin air or whatever, that don't relate to anything. From now on, our salaries will be directly tied to NTT's salary. So the NTTs and everyone else at Rutgers, all of our contracts expire June 30th. In the NTT's proposal for their new contract, they're proposing that their minimum salary be $66,058. So again, we're, in tying ourselves to their demands, we're going to use that as the basis upon which we're going to calculate equal pay for equal work. So there's a little bit of math involved, and here it is. So we first, one of the basic points is we need to determine what a full-time teaching course load is. There can be various arguments on this, but we came up with 20 credits per academic year. And then PTLs would be fractional NTTs, and we would be paid a fraction of a full-time, depending on how many credits we teach. So if the full-timers are teaching generally around 20 credits per semester, and we're teaching, say, 6, then we would get 6/20ths, for instance. Here's a specific example. PTL teaching a 3-credit course at PTL 1, they would get 0.15. And where does 0.15 come from? Well, it's 3 credits divided by the 20 overall. 3 divided by 20 is 0.15. So 0.15 times 66,000 comes out to $9,909. So this would be the university-wide minimum for all new PTLs teaching one course. So the base pay for all of us would be no lower than $9,909. Now, many of us are PTL 2s and 3s. We've been here a long time. We would come in at higher levels, and I'll show you where we would come in a minute. So concretely, what would this mean for my paycheck? Well, if you're a PTL 1, the base salary per course would be $9,909. This is compared to the current rate of $57.99. Now, this is a big increase. I mean, a lot of people will look at this percentage and say, that's crazy, but we're not. This is not a normal year-to-year contract. It's not like, well, between one contract and the next, we expect, to go up 5% a year or whatever. This is redressing a historic inequity at Rutgers. It's a one-time deal. We're saying we have to get in line with reality, with what full-timers are getting. What this happens to be is a 71% increase in our case. But as I said, PTL 2s and 3s will come in at higher ranks. The PTL 3 would come in at a pay of $13,188 per 3 credit course. So 2s and 3s, that concept would go away, because again, we're now tying ourselves to the whole employment relation of full-time entities. And so we would have rankings that would be based on the full-time entity rankings, and we would use our years of service. But our years of service would be not only the time we spend as entities, but there are many people in this call that I know personally who have been hired some semesters as NTTs, other semesters as PTLs. But in our old contract, any time you spend as an NTT doesn't count towards accumulating seniority for PTL 2 or 3. So we would redress that little problem too by saying anytime you put in as a PTL or NTT will go into your equivalent years of service. And then if you are already a PTL 2 or 3, you would be converted at the start to various places within the new advanced ranks. So what are the full-time NTT appointments and titles that we would be basically going along with? Well, they are the standard academic ranks. Currently the full-time entities, they have instructor NTT, assistant professor NTT, et cetera. So we would now have instructor fractional NTT, assistant professor fractional NTT, and you can see here when they would apply to. So your first and second appointment, when you're brand new, you would come in as an instructor, get a 1 semester appointment. But then after that, if they decided to hire you for a third appointment, they would have to give you at least a 1-year appointment, your fourth appointment, and thereafter you would have to get contracts for a term of at least 3 years. So L2s, current PTL2s would come into this new system at the beginning as an associate professor, fractional NTT, and PTL3s would come in as professor, fractional NTT. So great proposal, I think, but it would be sort of worthless without job security, because the university could say, well, why should I pay someone $13,000 as a fractional NTT professor when I can hire someone off the street for a lot less? So we need to have job security built into our contract as well. We'll ensure job security in a few different ways. One of the clauses that we have in our proposal is that the number of courses offered during each appointment must be for at least as many courses as you taught the previous year, and for fractional entities with appointments of 3 years or longer, which is the associate professor NTT and higher, reappointment shall be presumptively renewable, which means they basically have to renew you unless they have there's a really good reason. And this is all detailed in our proposal, but I'm giving you a summary now. So this is a new concept for us. I mean, we've never had this as PTLs at Rutgers, but it's not, we would not be unique if we got fractional appointments. There are some other universities that have already begun using fractional appointments for their adjunct faculty. And in fact, right here at Rutgers, we do have fractional appointments for an important division of Rutgers. The Rutgers Biomedical and Health Sciences is already using this. So at this point, this is the end of my overall introduction. I'm going to pass things on now to Dan Sidorick from the Rutgers Biomedical and Health Sciences Union, who will explain how it works for them.